NSFW, people of Reddit who have had sex with an in-law or step-sibling or parent. What happened? How did you get into that situation, and did anyone find out? Not my stepson, but my son's best friend from high school. They had just graduated, and my son had moved off to college. His friend needed a place to stay, so he rented my son's room while he was away. My son's friend was a very good tenant. He always paid his rent on time, kept the house clean, and helped out with the man jobs around the house. It was about 6 weeks after he moved in when I felt that he was having thoughts about me. His demeanor changed, his sentences were short, and he couldn't keep eye contact. I would made a risque double entendre, and he would get visibly red. I had divorced my husband back when my son was still in high school and never really found time to start another relationship, so the thought kind of turned me on. So one night, when he came home late from a party a little tipsy, I let him know I knew. He was quite embarrassed at first, but I told him it was alright to take off his pants and lie down. He laid down on the couch, and I grabbed his ankle and knee and began tugging it towards myself. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Pulling your leg," I answered, just like everyone reading this post. Come up with your own plot ideas. Pornhub. My dad had started dating following a messy divorce and, after being very coy about his activities for a few months, decided to introduce me to his girlfriend's family. We all traveled to a relative's country house and had a big party. The wine flowed pretty liberally. Eventually it was just me and the new girlfriend's daughter who remained. We'd been getting on pretty well all night, and we were both quite drunk at this point. I stood, deciding I'd had enough fun for one night, and kissed her goodnight. One thing led to another, and we slept together. This kept up for a few months. I'm not sure if dad ever grasped why I was always so excited to visit his girlfriend's place, but I was there in a flash if the invitation was offered. Fast forward 6 or 7 years, and dad married his partner. I was a groomsman. Now I like throwback quote, "I have never banged my sister in games of never have I ever." Don't regret it at all. We were in our teens and we're actually good friends now. One Christmas my uncle brought my future aunt-in-law over to meet everyone. I was 12 and she had big boobs, like stupidly big boobs. I got binoculars as a gift as part of a kid's bucket. I thought I was being so clever pretending to look around the room with them, just so I could stealthily, she was sitting 10 feet away, get a full zoomed in image of those lovely jubblies. I did this for like 30 minutes. In high school one of my close friends lost her virginity to her mid-30s stepbrother and began a relationship with him. They didn't grow up together. I always felt like he was a bit sleazy and that he groomed her. We were about 16. The thing is, they're still together, 15 years later, with a kid and everything. It really tore their family apart for a while though. My biological mother died when I was about 5 years old. Dad remarried about 2 years later to a woman who had a daughter who was the same age. We get along pretty well for the most part and years go by and nothing happened. Sometime when we were both 13, my stepmom got in a car accident and died almost instantly. We all took it really hard, especially my dad. Dad started to drink and not be very fatherly to either of us. He was depressed and rarely ever talked to us, and in turn, left my stepsister and I feeling despondent and unloved. One night I woke up to the sound of my stepsister crying. I went to her room to comfort her and calm her down. We both end up crying together, and we just held each other for a long time. I kissed her and went to go and leave, but for some reason, don't really know why, we just kept kissing for a while. Eventually we just ended up having sex. I don't really know why we did it. We had never had any attraction to each other beforehand, and we certainly never planned on having sex. I think both of us just liked the idea of being close to someone. We hadn't felt the touch of someone we loved for so long that I think it was just a way of coping. In total we had sex probably 14 or 15 times over the course of about 2 years. After that we just stopped, don't really know why. We just got over the feeling of being unloved I guess. No one knows as far as I'm aware. I did the deed with my mother-in-law once. It still makes me feel dirty when I think about it. I was separated from my wife at the time, in the process of divorcing, and went to my mother-in-law's house to help her with moving some furniture. We ended up sitting around after I helped and had a few cocktails and talked about my separation to her daughter. Fast forward to midnight and 6 drinks later, and all of a sudden I'm looking at her with her jeans to her ankles and bent over the kitchen table. I swear to this day I really don't know who made the first move or how it got to that point. It was crazy. The next day she calls me and plays the whole back quote "I had so much to drink I don't even remember last night" card. I get it. I know it was her way of pretending like it never happened, and I was perfectly okay with doing just that. I saw her numerous times after that, and neither of us acted strange. We just erased it and acted like nothing ever happened. At the time I was about 30 and my mother-in-law was about 50. I've never told anyone until now. Briefly, during high school, my girlfriend's parents were on the rocks. The mom was sleeping with another guy, and the family was in rough shape. So the dad's response was to go after my single mom. Next thing you know, my girlfriend's dad is having an affair with my mom, while the girlfriend's mom is having an affair with an old flame. They are going on double dates together, and the girlfriend and I are suddenly unofficial step siblings. And yes, it was awkward, even though it really had nothing to do with us. Thankfully, it didn't last long, maybe a month. Her mom and dad reconciled, and things went back to normal. There was one night they all came over to my mom's apartment with wine. We all drank. The mom and her fling went to a hotel. My mom and the dad went to bed, and then the girlfriend and I went to bed. That was weird. You know how everyone has 2 sets of grandparents, your father's parents and your mother's parents. Well, both sets of my grandparents divorced when my parents were just young kids, and then my father's father married my mother's mother. All of this was a decade or more before I was born. My paternal grandfather legally adopted my mother. She was about 9 years old at the time, and my father was raised by his mother and her subsequent husbands in a separate household, so my parents knew of each other's existence but weren't raised together. They met as late teens, got pregnant, married, divorced a few months later, and then I was born. Mom was already married to husband #2 of 5 by the time of my birth, but that's a whole other story. I ended up being adopted by my grandparents by age 2. The ones that are my paternal grandfather and maternal grandmother, which makes me sort of a second generational son, since they never had any direct kids with each other, just in their previous marriages. Odd side effects, I'm related to both sides of the family by blood, and I'm the only person in this situation, since everyone else can trace a lineage back to one set of grandparents or the other, but not both. Due to the adoption of my mother by my paternal grandfather, my parents were legal siblings, and due to me being adopted by my grandparents, it moves me up a generation, so I'm also legally siblings with my own parents. Heck, I'm even my own uncle. Never really grew up around my actual birth parents, but they are both great grandparents to my own children. My adopted parents have already died, but being raised by Depression-era grandparents definitely made for a different upbringing, not to mention having lived on a boat for years. Again, another long story. I've only had rudimentary discussions with my parents about what it was like for them in that situation. Apparently it was a bit of an uproar in the family, but it all worked out since I'm alive, I'm fairly intelligent, have all my fingers, and no weird tics or twitches. Best of all, due to their teenage hookups, they now still get to see each other at all family gatherings, weddings, graduations, etc. over 40 years later. My brother and stepsister had 6. They are both married and have children, and there is nothing weird between them. The weird thing is that my dad and stepmom encouraged it. They wanted them to be together and get married. My stepmom will occasionally bring it up when she has been drinking, like she still kind of wishes it had happened. My great aunt married the boy next door at age 18 in 1945 or so. Turns out he was gay and he wanted her to be his beard. Very unhappy. Her husband was estranged from his father, who had already divorced his mom. So the father-in-law joined the Navy at the outbreak of the war and spent the war building airstrips all over the Pacific and Southeast Asia. He gets back from the war, meets his son's wife. He and my great/aunt have instant chemistry. They apparently start banging almost immediately. He's been off at war and she's in a sexless marriage. So lots of pent-up sexual energy. Of course they get caught after a while. Mid-act the son and ex-wife show up. Actually provided a great out for the gay son, as he could divorce her, be the wrong party, and now be single with no questions about his sexuality. My great aunt suffered some social ostracism for this as it was juicy gossip for the city they lived in. However, when the divorce came, she married her former father-in-law. They remained married until his death in the mid-90s, both his age and the year, after nearly 50 years together and 3 kids, plus grandkids. They were quite happy, but this story has always been one my mom kept from me until I was 30. Had sex with my step-cousin. Unknowingly. My parents divorced when I was in grade school. Got on well enough with the stepmom when dad remarried my freshman year in high school. The wedding was low-key and I don't remember much about it. 4 years later I'm at college about 3 hours from my hometown. Big state uni. Stepmom offhandedly has mentioned that her niece goes to this school, but I never got in touch or connected with this person. It was the early/mid 90s. A few months into school, I randomly meet a girl at a party. We clicked on a sexual level. We didn't really date or go out, but we ducked like monkeys for the rest of the year. Just pure carnality. She lived in a different town about 2 hours from my hometown. Whatever. We exchanged housing info for the next year and went off to have our summer. In late July, stepmom is having a family reunion. She was so excited that I could finally meet her niece and maybe we would be friends and could study or hang out at uni. Cool. Whatever. Mom sheet. So we go to the reunion. Yup. The girl from college was stepmom's niece that I had spent the previous school year banging. Playing like we didn't know each other, it was an awkward family event. Kinda killed the magic of our lust. We booty called a few times that next school year, but it just fizzled. So, I had sex with my step-cousin. Only her and I, as far as I can tell, no 11/10ths would do again. I had sex with my brother-in-law, and my family do know, but pretend not to. My sister was married for a short time to a guy who worked and lived abroad most of the year. I never particularly liked the man. I think he wanted to be married to an attractive younger woman who would pretty much do what he say. Also, it was crazy because he was away 8 months of the year. My sister was young, ducking stupid in a lot of ways, didn't really get on with his friends and family, and generally felt like she'd been abandoned. Anyway, my sister, rather than live at his home when he was away, would move back in with my parents. He gave my sister access to a certain amount of money and much hilarity ensued. So I was in my first year of university and he found out that my sister had been cheating with him. Not only that, she'd done it with several people he knew, and he was not surprisingly angry. My parents, being idiots, decided to hire a lawyer who made things worse, and then the issue over what was happening with the money came up. So I came home from university and my family were about to be put out of their home. Also, I should mention he'd paid for some of my university expenses. I'm making this way too complicated, but essentially I ended up having sex with him in return for him calming down and letting my sister and family climb out of the financial hole they were in. The sex was pretty weird, and he enjoyed ducking me in my sister's bed way more than he should have. In the end though, he got out of my family's life and that was the end of it.